He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Why do I have to accompany you both wherever you go?
Because Amma and Appa won't let us go out alone, and there is talk that there might be insurrection soon.
It's sexism, that's what it is. Vishwa is younger than us both, and yet he can go out alone, but we can't.
It's not my fault that Amma lets
Why
me
are you
go.
walking so close to us? Walk a meter behind us.
Fine, I'll go home then.
No.
It takes memory and nostalgia and the idea of music and kind of uses that as a form to tell the coming of age of Sri Lanka, but also of a family.
Sri Lankan Tamil playwright and director Ahilan Karunaharan's final piece in a trilogy is about a month away from its world premiere. It's called a Mixtape for Maladies, and it's a play that follows the hugely successful Tea and the Morning After. It's been quite the journey for Ahilan after graduating from drama school in Wellington in 2007, but the one constant in what's an often temperamental arts world has been his drive to tell stories around memories of a homeland.
I was really interested in touching or telling the story of Sri Lanka, or Jaffna specifically, and I guess the exodus or the exile of the Tamil diaspora. Because at that point, when I was at drama school, the war hadn't ended. And the reality or the possibility of going home seemed impossible, or maybe not even plausible. And my first show started off in the need to kind of like recreate or remind our family and friends who have been away from home for so long what Lanka was and what Lanka used to be.
This is Here Now with me, Kadambari Raghukumar. A Mixtape for Maladies premieres at the Auckland Arts Festival in March and stars Ambika GKR in the lead role of Sangeetha, who flees war in Sri Lanka to arrive in New Zealand to raise her son, Deepan.
I think Sangeetha, my character in the show, she is caught between the two cultures. She wants to leave the trauma behind, but she's not a full New Zealander. And her son, she's raised him very Western. He doesn't speak the language. She's never shared her trauma or her history with him. That's what she does as part of this show. So this for her is a little bit like the stories that my parents haven't told me because I left India when I was a year old.
We're getting into more about what the play is all about shortly, but I really wanted to know more about Ambika, who's been known around the comedy and drama circles for some of her sold-out shows like Improv Masala. Yep, you've guessed it, using humour to shift stereotype. And that's not a topic going away anytime soon.
I think stereotypes are really interesting because they usually, almost always have a negative connotation. And I think they come from a place of a lack of knowledge. So if you don't know a culture, the first thing you reach for is an accent or a stereotype. So, you might have people suddenly talking about potatoes because they're doing an Irish accent, or, throwing a pizza in the air because they're doing an Italian accent, or nodding or shaking their head diagonally because they're doing an Indian accent. And those are the things that are really annoying. I've often lent into the stereotype quite heavily, mostly in my improv work, but also in like sketch work, and then try to find a twist in it. So often I'll play like an Indian auntie or an Indian mother, and I'll start off leaning into the stereotype, but then that allows me to open the door to changing the character, if that makes sense. And then it allows the audience to see the stereotype shift and the stereotype move and understand, connect with the person the stereotype is, as opposed to just going, that's a stereotype. And so that's how I sort of take it quite playfully, and I have a lot of fun with it.
In terms of you sitting on the fence between being Indian, raised in Zambia, in what ways it sort of shaped your sense of place in the world?
In a very short sentence, I had a very liberal upbringing with very conservative parents. So my parents are very, very Indian. And I know you can't generalize and you can't stereotype, but they are quite conservative Indian, whether it's religiously or, in terms of how they raise their kids and the expectations they had of us. But at the same time, I had a very liberal education because I grew up with the British education system, and then I moved to New Zealand. I never really studied in India. Interestingly, though, now I think as a person, I tend to be more conservative than my cousins who were born and raised in India. So it's definitely been a confusing life in many ways. And I'd never know quite where I sit on any one topic. And it's like, I do have to introspect and think about a lot of things before I decide where I sit, whether it's, do I fall on the conservative side of this or the liberal side of this? Do I fall on the Indian side of this or the Western side of this? It's just a constant thinking game. But I feel like as I've gotten older, and certainly after I had children, I feel like I'm more at peace with who I am, and I don't need to put a label on it as much.
What was growing up in Zambia like for you and your family?
It was never meant to be. I was never meant to grow up there. So what happened is Zambia got independence in 1964, and they imported a lot of skilled labor from India. So that's how my dad got a 1-year contract to go to Zambia when I was like a year and a half old. And it was only meant to be for a year, but the contract kept getting extended. And so for my parents, it was very much, we're Indian, we're going to go back to India any day now. So we're going to raise our kids Indian, is how it was. But it was also a very closed off expatriate community. And there is a difference between expatriate and immigrant, I think, because the company that had employed my dad provided us with a house, provided us with a school, provided us with medical facilities, provided us with passage home at the end of every contract. So we would go back to India every 2 years, 1 to 2 years to, see home, visit home, and then we'd come back to Zambia to kick off the next contract. So it was very much of a, it's like I didn't live in Zambia. I didn't take on Zambian citizenship. We weren't residents. We lived in like a separate community that the company owned. So it was a very different lifestyle to then moving to New Zealand. And I moved to New Zealand when I was 16. In Zambia, it was an expatriate lifestyle, so I didn't really belong there. Whereas in New Zealand, it's an immigrant lifestyle. So I belong here, but I also don't belong here. And in India, I'm Indian, but I don't belong there either. So it's that finding that in-betweenness, but then being okay with it.
How has all of this played into your landing this role?
Great question. I think Sangeeta, my character in the show, she is caught between the two cultures. She wants to leave the trauma behind, but she's not a full New Zealander. And her son, she's raised him very Western. He doesn't speak the language. She's never shared her trauma or her history with him. That's what she does as part of this show. So this for her is a little bit like the stories that my parents haven't told me because I left India when I was a year old. And there are a lot of stories that they never told me that I had to go and meet my grandmother as an adult and my aunts and uncles to hear some stories that my parents had never shared. So there's a bit of that in play, which I draw from real life. And so I feel like I've sort of been thinking a lot about my grandmother during this because she grew up in Sri Lanka. And I've been thinking a lot about immigration and travel and that intersectionality, that in-betweenness, and where does she fit and how does she feel in order to try and bring truth to her story.
I love that one particular line that seems in many ways a defining concept for this play in terms of a memory being something that could be a gift or a curse. And when you look at the story of Mixtape for Maladies in terms of how a family history gets unearthed through Deepan's discovery of songs in this particular mixtape, there is a lot of bittersweetness in that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as I'm going through and listening to the playlist for this, I'm sort of thinking about, well, where were my parents when this movie came out? I mean, when this song came out, when, where were they? Because they're not quite Sangeeta's age, but they're a little bit older than her. But it's like these songs have my own family history. There's one song that I was talking about that I think my mom danced to when she was in school. So I'm going, oh gosh, this is, there's this personal history wrapped up with memories, wrapped up with where we're going. Yeah, there's a lot. And so not all of it is good because memory is a gift, but there's some stuff I would really much rather forget if I can, and that's true for everyone.
I was in a meeting.
About?
Things are changing for our country and it's not looking good.
Has anything ever been good for our country?
Well, the British are gone.
Now we have to clean up their mess.
They want to make Sinhala the official language of the country.
They can't do that, can they? It will break this country.
The cracks are already appearing.
Appa, can we get candy floss at the fair?
Yes, of course.
Nectar soda?
Absolutely.
A new cricket bat?
Now you're just pushing it.
Why would a New Zealander want to come and see this play?
So often, I think we see stories of other nations or other cultures and we think, oh, we're so far removed from that, or this happened in a time where the kind of systems and the human rights kind of like, policies didn't exist. But the reality is that the politics of Sri Lanka and what happened or what is happening there is happening in cycles in so many other nations. And a lot of the kind of oppressive and the regressive kind of policies that the Sri Lanka government imposed on the people is actually not too dissimilar, too far from what is happening here in Aotearoa right now. And so I think there's a certain access point for people who are not from the community, not from the culture, to be able to kind of reflect and look at where do we stand as a nation, or where does my family sit in terms of legacies and inheritance and stories we take forward. And I think, there's a sense of understanding, empathy that comes with being able to witness another community's journey, or another community's coming of age, or another community's loss. And I think there's a rich accessway point, but also great gateways into a community, a culture, a language, and a people.
Ahilan Karunaharan and Ambika GKR talking to me about a mixtape for Maladies that premieres at the Auckland Arts Festival from 4th March onwards. My name is Kadambari Raghukumar, and every week I bring you a new episode of Here Now from all around New Zealand, featuring people from all around the world. You can catch Here Now on all your favorite podcast platforms, as well as the RNZ website. Thanks for listening.